They told me the price of my silence was $3 million. They put the check on the table, thick and cream-colored, right next to a non-disclosure agreement designed to bury my marriage, my reputation, and my past. Everyone in that room, my ex-wife, Laura, her parents, and their shark of a lawyer, Mr. Halpern, thought they were buying my disappearance. They thought the story ended the moment I capped my pen, but they made one critical mistake. They rushed me. And people only rush when they are terrified of what you might find if you stay just one day longer. I signed the papers. I took the money, but I didn't leave. And 72 hours later, on the morning of their perfect wedding, a single DNA test didn't just stop the ceremony, it burned their entire world to the ground. If you're watching this from somewhere in the world where the powerful think they can write checks big enough to erase the truth, drop a comment and let me know where you are. And if this story sounds like something you need to see through to the end, hit that like button now. You're going to want to remember where you were when this all unraveled. The conference room was on the 14th floor. Corner office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city I'd called home for 8 years but never really owned. The air conditioning was aggressive enough to raise goosebumps, which I suspected was intentional. Cold rooms make people want to leave faster. The leather chair I sat in cost more than my first car. Everything in that space was designed to remind you of the difference between their world and yours. Laura sat 3 seats down from me, close enough that I could see her hands folded in her lap, far enough that we didn't have to make eye contact. She wore a cream blouse I'd never seen before, probably new, probably expensive, probably purchased with the understanding that this meeting was a performance, and she needed to look the part of the woman who'd outgrown her starter marriage. Her mother, Victoria, sat beside her with the kind of posture that suggested she'd never slouched in her life. The expression of someone attending a necessary but distasteful medical procedure. She hadn't spoken to me directly in 6 months, not since the separation. She didn't start now. Her father, Richard, stood by the window with his back to the room, hands clasped behind him like a general surveying a battlefield he'd already won. I'd met him 4 times in 8 years of marriage. Twice at weddings. Once at a charity gala Laura dragged me to. Once at the hospital when Laura's grandmother passed. He had a talent for being present without ever actually being there. And then there was Halpern. Mr. Halpern sat directly across from me, a position of power he'd chosen deliberately, silver hair combed back with mathematical precision. Navy suit that probably cost what I made in a month. Cufflinks that caught the light when he moved. He had the kind of face that looked trustworthy in photographs, strong jaw, clear eyes, the suggestion of a smile that never quite reached the surface. In person, he looked like what he was. A man who solved problems by making them disappear. He slid the check toward me first. Let it sit there. Let me look at it. $2 million. The number was almost abstract. I'd never seen that many zeros on a piece of paper, with my name attached to the outcome. It sat there like a test. Like a dare. Mr. Ratchet, Halpern said, and his voice had that smooth, controlled quality of someone who'd never had to raise it to be heard. I think you'll find the terms more than fair. Fair. The word tasted wrong in the air between us. I didn't reach for the check. Not yet. Instead, I pulled the NDA closer. 47 pages. I'd already read it twice at home, once in the car on the way over, but I made a show of flipping through it again, slowly. Like I had all the time in the world. Halpern's jaw tightened. Just barely, just enough. Section 12, subsection C, caught my attention again, the same way it had the first time. Party A agrees to make no public or private statements regarding the marriage dissolution, including but not limited to matters of a medical, personal, or speculative nature concerning Party B's health, reproductive status, or family planning decisions. Medical circumstances, reproductive status. The language was surgical. Specific. The kind of specific that meant someone was terrified of a particular conversation happening. You've been very thorough, I said, tapping the clause with my index finger. Especially here. Halpern smiled. It was the smile of a shark in shallow water. We believe in clarity, Mr. Ratchet. Ambiguity leads to misunderstandings. Misunderstandings lead to litigation. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that, I repeated. Laura shifted in her seat. I didn't look at her. If I looked at her, I'd see something I didn't want to see: guilt, maybe. Or relief. Or worse, nothing at all. I kept my eyes on Halpern. The check is certified, he continued. You can deposit it today. Walk out of here, start fresh. We've even included a reference letter for future employment opportunities, should you need it. No hard feelings. Just a clean break. A clean break. As if 8 years of marriage could be sanitized with the right paperwork and a big enough number, Victoria finally spoke. Stephen. My name sounded wrong in her mouth, like she was tasting something sour. This is generous. You know that. I did know that. $2 million for a man who made $68,000 a year as a data analyst was more than generous. It was suspicious. Richard turned from the window. Sign the papers, son. He'd never called me son when I was married to his daughter. Move on with your life. Let Laura move on with hers. Let Laura move on. That phrase did something to my chest. Tightened it. Because moving on implied she was stuck. And stuck implied I was the obstacle. I wasn't the one who'd filed. I wasn't the one who'd sat her down over coffee 3 months ago and said, this isn't working anymore. I wasn't the one who'd had her parents' lawyer draw up papers before I even knew we were having the conversation. But I was the one holding the pen. I looked at Laura then. Couldn't help it. She was staring at the table, at a spot somewhere between the check and her mother's handbag. Her expression was blank, practiced, the look of someone who'd been told what to do and was doing it. Laura, I said quietly. She looked up. For just a second, I saw something flicker behind her eyes. Fear, maybe, or regret. But then it was gone, smoothed over like water closing over a stone. Please, she said. Just that, please. She wasn't asking me to stay. She was asking me to go. I picked up the pen. Halpern exhaled. Just barely. Just enough. The pen was heavy, German-made, probably. The kind of pen that signed treaties and corporate buyouts. I signed my name on page 47, Stephen Ratchett. The letters looked small on the massive document, like I was signing away more than a marriage. Like I was signing away proof I'd ever existed in their world at all. Halpern pulled the document toward him before the ink was dry. Flipped through it with practiced efficiency, checking each signature line, each initial, each place where I'd agreed to disappear. Excellent, he said, and he meant it. He slid the check toward me with 2 fingers, the way you'd slide a tip across a bar. Congratulations, Mr. Ratchett. You're a free man. Free. I picked up the check. Held it. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind of stock that didn't bend easily. $2 million. Enough to start over. Enough to forget. Enough to make me wonder why they needed me to forget so badly. I stood. The chair scraped against the polished floor. Laura didn't look up. Victoria's expression didn't change. Richard had already turned back to the window, the matter concluded in his mind. Only Halpern watched me, his eyes tracking my movement like a predator watching prey leave the clearing. We appreciate your cooperation, Halpern said. And your discretion. I nodded. Didn't trust myself to speak. Folded the check once, slipped it into my jacket pocket, and walked toward the door. My hand was on the handle when Halpern spoke again. Mr. Ratchett. I stopped. Didn't turn around. I trust we won't be seeing you at any upcoming family events. It wasn't a question. It was a warning. You won't, I said. I opened the door and walked out. The hallway was bright after the dim conference room. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. My footsteps echoed on marble floors. I passed secretaries who didn't look up. Paralegals who stepped aside without acknowledgement. I was already a ghost. The elevator took 43 seconds to arrive. I counted. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. The doors closed, sealing me away from the 14th floor, from Laura, from the life I'd apparently been purchased out of. The check felt heavy in my pocket, but the silence felt heavier. They didn't just want me gone. They wanted me unremembered. I stood in the elevator, watching the numbers descend, and thought about the NDA. About Section 12. Subsection C. About the word rush that Halpern had used 3 times in our phone call last week, always with an edge of urgency that didn't match the calm in his voice today. People only rush when they're running from something, or towards something, or when they're terrified you'll find it before they can bury it. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. I stepped out into a world where I was $2 million richer and completely alone. I walked through the glass doors, out onto the street where the afternoon sun hit me like a slap. The city noise rushed in cars, sirens, construction. The ambient hum of 1,000 lives, intersecting and moving on. I stood there on the sidewalk, people flowing around me like I was a stone in a river. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, prepared to photograph the check. Then I stopped, because something Halpern had said was bothering me. Something about the reference letter, about future employment, about moving on. They'd thought of everything. Every possible need I might have. Every possible reason I might come back. They'd preemptively solved, except they'd been so focused on buying my future that they'd forgotten I still had access to my past. I put the phone away, left the check undeposited, and I started walking. Not toward my apartment. Not toward the train station that would take me out of the city like they expected. Toward the storage unit on 5th and Morrison where I'd boxed up 8 years of a life when I moved out 3 months ago. Because somewhere in those boxes was a file I'd forgotten about. A medical consult from 3 years ago when Laura and I had been trying to conceive. When we'd gone to doctors and specialists and spent thousands of dollars we didn't have on tests and treatments that went nowhere. A file that had conclusions I'd never wanted to think about again. Conclusions that, if I was right, made Laura's pregnancy with twins statistically impossible. The math didn't lie. But everyone else did. I signed my name, and they exhaled like they'd just defused a bomb. But all they'd really done was start the timer. The storage unit smelled like cardboard and regret. I'd rented it the day Laura asked me to move out, back when I still thought we might reconcile. Back when I believed packing up my life was temporary. A cooling-off period that would end with apologies and a fresh start. The unit was climate-controlled, which felt absurd now. I'd paid extra to preserve a marriage that was already dead. Unit 247. 3rd floor. The hallway fluorescent lights flickered as I walked, casting everything in an unstable yellow glow. My footsteps echoed off concrete walls. The facility was nearly empty on a Tuesday afternoon. Just me and the ghosts of other people's abandoned lives. I punched in the code. Boxes. 37 of them, stacked with the precision of someone who'd convinced himself organization could control chaos. I'd labeled everything. Books. Kitchen. Office. Like I was cataloging artifacts from an archaeological dig instead of the remnants of 8 years. The check was still in my pocket. $2 million, undeposited. I'd walked 16 blocks from Halpern's office building to get here instead of going home. My apartment, the small one-bedroom I'd rented after the separation, felt wrong for what I needed to do. Too present tense. Too much about moving forward. I needed to go backward. I pulled the first box labeled office toward me. The tape made a ripping sound that felt too violent for the quiet space. Inside. Old tax returns. Performance reviews from jobs I'd left. A coffee mug from a company that no longer existed. Nothing useful. The second box. Printer paper, folders, a stapler that had jammed on me so many times I'd nearly thrown it out a window. I pushed it aside. The third box felt heavier. I cut the tape and opened it. Manila folders, organized alphabetically, because even in crisis I was pathologically neat. Medical records. I'd kept everything, every test, every consultation, every bill that insurance had partially covered and we'd argued about paying. The folder was labeled Dr. Amanda Reeves, Reproductive Endocrinology. My hands stopped. I'd forgotten about Dr. Reeves. Or more accurately, I'd buried the memory of Dr. Reeves under 2 years of trying not to think about failure. Laura and I had seen her during year 5 of our marriage, when the unspoken question of children had become a spoken argument. When Laura's mother had started making pointed comments about grandchildren at every family dinner. When trying had become scheduled and clinical and joyless. I opened the folder. The paper was 3 years old, but the truth on it was brand new. There were intake forms, insurance verification, Laura's test results showing perfectly normal hormone levels and ovarian reserve. And then, stapled to the back, my analysis. Semen analysis report patient. Stephen Ratchet date. The 15th of March, 2022. The numbers were right there, had always been there. I just hadn't wanted to look at them after we'd stopped trying. Sperm concentration, 8 million ml. Normal, is greater than 15 million ml. Total motility, 22% normal, is greater than 40%. Progressive motility, 18% normal. And at the bottom, in Dr. Reeves's precise handwriting, severe oligoasthenozoospermia. Natural conception probability is less than 5% per cycle. Twin pregnancy, statistically rare without intervention. Recommend IVF with ICSI. We'd never done IVF. Laura had said it was too expensive. I'd agreed. Relieved not to have that conversation about whether we even wanted children badly enough to spend money we didn't have. And then we just stopped talking about it. I pulled out my phone, opened the calendar, counted backward. Laura had told me she was pregnant on August 3rd, 4 months ago. A miracle. I did the math again, slower this time, like maybe I'd gotten it wrong the first pass. Conception would have been sometime in May. We were still living together in May. Still married, even if we weren't happy. Still occasionally going through the motions of being a couple. But the numbers in my hand said it was nearly impossible. Less than 5% chance per cycle. And that was for a single pregnancy. Twins without intervention? The odds were so low Dr. Reeves hadn't even bothered calculating them. If she was pregnant with twins, the math didn't add up. I sat down on a box labeled winter clothes. The concrete floor was cold. The storage unit suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. Laura had told me about the pregnancy 3 weeks before she asked for the divorce. I remembered the conversation because it hadn't felt like a conversation. It felt rehearsed. She'd said the words, "I'm pregnant. It's twins." I don't know how, but her delivery was flat, practiced, like she was reading from a script someone else had written. I'd been shocked. Then thrilled, briefly, before the thrill curdled into confusion because we'd barely touched each other in months. Then she'd cried and said she couldn't do this, couldn't be married to me and raise children, that it was too much. That she needed to figure things out, and I'd left. Because when someone tells you they can't do it anymore, you don't force them. 3 weeks later, her lawyer called with the separation papers. 6 weeks after that, I saw her having lunch with Greg, the new fiancé. The man who apparently stepped in so quickly that by the time I signed the divorce papers today, they were already planning a wedding. A wedding scheduled for this Saturday. 3 days from now. I pulled the medical report closer. Read it again. The numbers didn't change. My phone buzzed. Text message. Unknown number. Hope you're settling in well. Remember, discretion is appreciated. H. Halpern. Checking in. Making sure I'd taken the money and disappeared like a good little problem. I stared at the message. At the medical report in my lap. At the boxes surrounding me, containing the evidence of a life I'd been paid to forget. They rushed the divorce, rushed the settlement, rushed me out the door with a check big enough that most people wouldn't ask questions. Most people would take $2 million and start over. Most people wouldn't have kept their medical records. I stood up. Photographed every page of Dr. Reeves's report with my phone. Saved them to 3 different cloud services. Printed to email. Then I carefully placed the original back in the folder and closed the box. I wasn't leaving town. I was just moving to a vantage point. Because if Laura was pregnant with twins and I wasn't the father and the biology said I couldn't be, then someone else was. And that someone had enough influence to orchestrate a $2 million divorce settlement with an NDA specifically designed to prevent me from talking about medical circumstances or reproductive status. Someone was very afraid of what I knew, or what I might figure out. I pulled out my phone again, not to deposit the check, to book a hotel room, something anonymous, something with a view of the venue, where Laura's wedding was supposed to happen in 72 hours. I typed out a text to Marcy, the paralegal who'd worked on my case. We'd gone to college together. Lost touch, then reconnected when she'd been assigned my file. She'd been the only person in Halpern's office who treated me like a human being instead of a line item. M, can you check something for me? Quietly. Is there a prenatal paternity test scheduled for L? Date and location. If yes, I hesitated. Then, hit send. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, disappeared. Then appeared again. Why are you asking? Because the math doesn't work. The dots pulsed for a long time. Give me an hour. I pocketed the phone. Took one last look at the boxes, at the carefully labeled evidence of who I used to be. Then I pulled the metal door down and locked it. The storage unit could keep my past. I was going to find out who'd stolen my present. The hotel room smelled like industrial cleaner and bad decisions. I'd chosen the Prescott Arms because it was the kind of place people went to disappear. No doorman. No concierge asking about the purpose of your stay. Just a bored desk clerk who took cash without looking up from her phone and handed me a keycard that had been demagnetized twice before it finally opened the door to room 408. Beige walls, beige carpet, beige comforter pulled tight across a queen bed that had the structural integrity of a park bench. A landscape painting above the headboard, mountains, maybe, or clouds. It was hard to tell, screwed into the wall so guests couldn't steal it. A window that looked out onto the street below. Where the bakery Laura had chosen for the wedding cake was visible 3 blocks down. I'd picked this location deliberately. I set my laptop on the desk, that was really just a laminate board attached to the wall. Plugged in, my phone. Opened the curtains exactly 3 inches so I could see out, but anyone looking up would see only darkness and the reflection of streetlights on glass. Then I waited. Marcy called at 6:47 p.m. You're not going to like this, she said without preamble. I put her on speaker. Kept my eyes on the street below. Tell me. There's a prenatal paternity test scheduled for Wednesday. Tomorrow. Gene Care Labs on Westwood. Appointment at 10 a.m. Tomorrow. 2 days before the wedding. Who ordered it? The filing doesn't say, but it's flagged as priority processing. They're paying extra for 24-hour results instead of the standard 5 to 7 days. I watched a couple walk past the bakery, arm in arm, laughing about something I couldn't hear. Normal people living normal lives. Why schedule a paternity test 72 hours before a wedding unless you're terrified? Marcy was quiet for a moment. Then, Stephen. What's going on? I could tell her. Should tell her. Maybe. But Marcy worked for Halpern's firm. Even if she'd been kind to me. Even if we had history. Trust was expensive, and I'd already spent too much of it. Just a feeling, I said. Can you get me the results when they come in? Absolutely not. That's a HIPAA violation 6 ways from Sunday. I could lose my license. Juver 2S. What if they were leaked? Accidentally. Stephen. What if someone at the lab made a mistake? Left a file open. Sent an email to the wrong person. She exhaled. It sounded frustrated and worried in equal measure. This isn't like you. You don't do sneaky. You do spreadsheets and logical decision trees and risk assessment. Maybe I'm evolving. Or maybe you're spiraling. A pause. Where are you right now? I looked around the beige room. At the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a Rorschach test. Somewhere between both. The settlement was good, Stephen. Really good. You could go anywhere. Start over. Why are you? Because they paid me $2 million to forget something I'm not supposed to remember. And that makes me want to remember it more. Marcy sighed. I can't help you with the test results. But I can tell you that Halpern's been on the phone all afternoon with someone. And he sounded worried. Number 4. About what? About you, I think. He asked if I knew where you were planning to go. If you'd mentioned any travel plans. What did you say? That you were a private person, and we barely talked during the case. She paused. Which was a lie. But I'm allowed to lie to Halpern. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Just be careful. Whatever you think you're doing. These people have resources. You don't. She hung up. I sat in the beige room and watched the street. A cab pulled up to the bakery. Someone got out. Victoria, Laura's mother. Unmistakable even from 4 stories up. She moved with the kind of purpose that suggested the cake tasting was a battle she intended to win. I became a ghost in my own life, watching them celebrate my exit. My phone buzzed. Email notification. I opened it. It was from the bank. An automated message confirming that a check in the amount of $2 million had been issued to me and was currently outstanding. If I intended to deposit it, I should do so within 90 days to avoid complications. I deleted the email. Then I opened my laptop and started researching. GeneCare Labs, founded 2018. Specialized in prenatal testing, paternity verification, and genetic counseling. 4 locations across the city. The Westwood branch was the flagship newer building. Better equipment, faster turnaround times. I clicked through to their services page. Prenatal paternity testing, non-invasive, results in 5 to 7 business days, 99.9% accuracy. Priority processing available for an additional fee. Additional fee. That phrase again, money buying speed. I navigated to the staff directory. 12 employees at the Westwood location. Lab techs, genetic counselors, administrative staff. I screenshotted the page. Saved it. Then I did something I wasn't proud of. I opened Facebook. Typed in GeneCare Labs Westwood. Found their business page. Scrawled through the employee tags. Until I found someone who looked young and overworked and underpaid. Daniel Frost, lab technician. Graduated from state school 2 years ago with a degree in molecular biology. Posted mostly about his dog and his student loans. I stared at his profile picture. Debated. Decided against it. Instead, I opened a burner email account. Typed carefully. Subject: regarding Wednesday's priority case. I'm a concerned party who believes testing procedures may be compromised. If you observe any irregularities in sample handling or result reporting for the 10 a.m. prenatal test tomorrow, please consider documenting them. Sometimes the right thing and the legal thing aren't the same. I didn't sign it. Didn't expect a response. Just sent it to the general lab email address and hoped someone young and idealistic and frustrated with the system might read it. Probably nothing would come of it. But I'd learned something in 8 years of data analysis. You don't need certainty. You just need enough probability to make the bet worthwhile. I closed the laptop. Looked out the window again. The lights were on in the bakery now. I could see Victoria gesturing at something, probably a fondant issue or a ribbon color that wasn't quite right. Laura stood beside her, nodding, agreeing, being managed. Greg wasn't there. My phone buzzed again. Text message. Unknown number. Saw you didn't deposit the check. Everything okay? H. Halpern. Again. Checking in. Making sure his investment was behaving. I typed back. Just taking my time. Big decision. 3 dots. Then, of course. No rush. No rush. The same phrase he'd used 6 times during our settlement negotiation. Always casual. Always followed by a deadline. I set the phone down. Pulled the medical report photos up on my screen. Looked at the numbers again. Sperm concentration. Motility. The statistical improbability of twins. Then I pulled up Laura's Instagram. She'd blocked me after the separation, but her account was public. Registry links for things I couldn't pronounce. The most recent post was from this morning. A photo of her hand wearing an engagement ring I'd never seen. Caption reading, 3 days until forever. Love number blessed. 3 days. The same timeline as the paternity test. I sat back in the chair. It creaked. The hotel room suddenly felt very small and very large at the same time. Someone was making sure the biology lined up before the wedding. Someone was paying for priority processing to get results before Laura walked down the aisle, which meant someone wasn't sure, or someone knew and was trying to bury it. I pulled out a notepad, the cheap kind the hotel left by the phone, and started writing. Not conclusions. Just questions. Why test if you're certain? Why rush results if you're not worried? Who benefits if Greg is the father? Who loses if he isn't? I stared at the last question. Then I wrote one more. Who has the most to lose if I'm not the father? And Greg isn't either. The room was quiet except for the mini fridge hum and the distant sound of traffic. I stood, stretched, looked out at the street where my ex-wife was planning a wedding to a man who might not be the father of her children, where I'd been paid $2 million to disappear so no one would ask that question. My phone lit up. Email notification. And then Pravik Sex, to Benny God. The sender, defrost.genicare. At protonmail.com. The subject line, we should talk. The phone buzzed. Unknown number. Unknown intent. I'd been staring at Daniel Frost's email for 20 minutes, debating whether to respond when the text message arrived at 11:34 p.m. The screen lit up the dark hotel room like a flare. You should know they're pushing the DNA results before the wedding on purpose. Ask yourself why they need confirmation before she says I do. No name, no context, just the message and a timestamp. I sat up in bed. The sheets were scratchy, institutional. I'd been lying on top of the covers, fully clothed, half asleep, half waiting for something exactly like this. I typed back, "Who is this?" 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Then, "Someone who's tired of watching them bury people." I stared at the words. Read them twice. The phrasing was specific. Bury people. Plural. Like I wasn't the first problem Halpern had solved with money and paperwork. "What do you know?" I typed. The response took longer this time. "Enough to know you're not crazy for staying. Not enough to prove anything." I got out of bed, paced to the window. The street below was empty now, just streetlights and the occasional car passing through. The bakery was dark. Victoria and Laura had gone home hours ago to dream about fondant and flower arrangements and a wedding that might not happen. "Why tell me this?" I typed. "Because you're the only one who can stop it. And because someone should." In Faraday and Marking Makers, the message felt final, like the sender had said what they came to say and was done. I tried calling the number. It rang once, then disconnected. Tried again. I took a screenshot. Saved it to the same cloud folder as the medical records. Then I opened Daniel Frost's email again. "I don't know who you are, but I know which case you're talking about, and I know something's wrong with it. Can we meet?" Somewhere public. Tomorrow morning before the appointment. He'd send it from a Proton Mail account. Encrypted. Anonymous. The kind of email address people used when they didn't want their employer tracking their correspondence. I typed back, "Coffee shop, on the corner of Westwood and 5th, 8 a.m. Hit send. Waited. The response came 3 minutes later. "I'll be wearing a blue jacket. Don't bring anyone." I set the phone down. Looked at the clock. 11:47 p.m. 8 hours until the meeting. 12 hours until the paternity test. 72 hours until the wedding. The timeline was compressing. Everyone was moving faster now. My phone rang. Not a text. An actual call. The screen showed Laura. I stared at it. Let it ring twice. 3 times. Considered not answering. Considered all the reasons why my ex-wife would be calling me at midnight 2 days before her wedding. On the 4th ring, I answered. "Stephen." Her voice was quiet, strained. Like she was in a closet or a bathroom, or somewhere she shouldn't be making this call. "Laura, She stopped. I could hear her breathing. "I shouldn't be calling." "But, then why are you?" Silence. Long enough that I thought she'd hung up. "Then, did you deposit the check?" Strange question. "No." "Why not?" I walked back to the window. Looked out at nothing. "Why do you care?" "Because if you haven't deposited it, you can still give it back. You can still walk away from all of this." "I signed the papers, Laura." "I already walked away." "But you're still here." Not a question. A statement. Like she knew. Like someone had told her. "You're still in the city." I didn't confirm or deny. Just waited. She made a sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been something else. "You were always good at waiting. At watching. at figuring things out after everyone else had moved on. Is there a reason you called? Another pause. Then, quieter. I wanted to tell you, I'm sorry. For what? For all of it. For how it ended. For... The words hung in the air between us. I could push. Could ask what she meant by honest. Could demand answers to questions I'd been accumulating like evidence. But something in her voice made me hold back. She didn't sound like a bride. She sounded like a hostage. Are you okay? I don't know. Her voice cracked. I don't know anymore. Cam. Her. Laura. If you need help. I can't. Fast. Panicked. I can't talk about it. I can't. They said if I talked to you, if I said anything about... She stopped herself. I heard voices in the background. Muffled. Female. Probably her mother. I have to go, Laura whispered. Wait. Don't come to the wedding, Stephen. Please. Just take the money and go somewhere far away and forget about all of this. Why would I need to stay away from a wedding I'm not invited to? Because you're going to want to stop it. And if you try, they'll... Her voice dropped so low I almost couldn't hear it. They'll destroy you. They have lawyers and money and they've done it before. They'll make you disappear in ways that don't involve checks. My hand tightened on the phone. Who's they? Laura. Everyone. My parents. Halpern. Greg's family. Everyone who needs this wedding to happen. And what about what you need? She laughed then. Definitely a laugh this time. Bitter and broken and nothing like the woman I'd married. What I need stopped mattering a long time ago. The line went dead. I stood there holding the phone, listening to silence, trying to process what had just happened. Laura had called me, had warned me, had apologized for something she wouldn't name and told me to run from something she wouldn't identify. Someone inside their circle was trying to open a door, but they were too afraid to open it all the way. I pulled up the unknown number from earlier, the one who'd texted about the DNA results. Typed, Laura just called me, told me to leave town. Who's scaring her? The response came faster this time. Same person who scared you into signing. Same person who scared everyone into silence. But she's more trapped than you were. You got bought. She got owned. Halpern, 3 dots. Then, among others, it's not one person. It's a system, and she's been inside it her whole life. I sat down on the edge of the bed. What do they have on her? I typed. Same thing they have on everyone. Leverage. Secrets. The kind that destroy lives if they get out. And the babies? A longer pause this time. Long enough that I thought they wouldn't answer. Then, the babies are the leverage. I read the message 3 times. Explain. I typed. But there was no response. I waited 5 minutes. 10. Sent another message. Are you still there? Nothing. The conversation was over. The door had opened just wide enough for me to see shadows, then slammed shut again. I lay back on the bed. Stared at the water-stained ceiling. Tried to connect the pieces. Laura was trapped. The babies were leverage. The DNA test was being rushed before the wedding. Someone was texting me warnings. Someone at the lab wanted to talk. And Halpern was at the center of all of it, pulling strings, managing narratives, buying silence. My phone buzzed one more time. Different number. Another unknown. 8 a.m. Blue jacket. Come alone and come ready to listen. What I have to tell you will change everything. Daniel Frost, the lab tech. I closed my eyes. Let the pieces float in the dark behind my eyelids. Tried to see the pattern. Laura was sorry. Laura was scared. Laura had told me to run. Laura had told me to run, which meant she knew something. And whatever she knew was bad enough that even $2 million didn't seem like adequate compensation for what I was about to discover. I set an alarm for 6 a.m. Then I lay there in the beige room with its industrial cleaner smell and its bad decisions, waiting for morning to come and for someone in a blue jacket to tell me the truth everyone else was paying to hide. Daniel Frost had the look of someone who hadn't slept in 3 days. We met at the coffee shop at 8 a.m. like planned. He was 26, maybe 27, with the kind of nervous energy that comes from knowing something you're not supposed to know. The blue jacket was worn at the elbows. His coffee sat untouched in front of him, gone cold. "You're Stephen," he said when I sat down. "Not a question. And you work at Gene Care?" He nodded. Looked around the coffee shop like someone might be watching. Everyone was watching their phones. "I shouldn't be here," he said. "But you are." He pulled out his phone, opened an email, turned the screen toward me. The subject line read, "Priority processing, rush order, confidential." The body of the email was short. "Lab team, we have a high-value client requiring expedited prenatal paternity results. All standard protocols apply, but timeline is non-negotiable. Generous processing fee has been arranged. Management." I read it twice. Tier 1 means someone important, someone with money, someone we don't say no to. And the generous processing fee? Daniel's jaw tightened. $5,000 on top of the standard rush fee. For a test that normally takes 5 days, we're being paid to deliver it in 24 hours. That's possible? Technically, yes. The science doesn't change. We can run it faster if we prioritize it over everything else. But, he stopped, looked at his cold coffee. But someone's applying pressure. The kind of pressure that makes people cut corners. What kind of corners? The kind where results get reviewed by the right people, where inconvenient findings get clarified. I leaned back in my chair. You think they're going to falsify the results? I think they're creating an environment where falsification becomes possible. Where someone in the chain might be incentivized to make sure the results say what they're supposed to say. And what are they supposed to say? Daniel looked at me directly for the first time. That the father is Gregory Thornhill. The groom. The groom. Money can buy speed, but it can't buy biology. I pulled out my phone. Showed him the screenshot of my medical records. The sperm analysis. The numbers that made twin pregnancy nearly impossible. I was married to the woman getting tested today. Daniel studied the numbers. His expression didn't change. He was a scientist. He understood what he was looking at. And you think the groom isn't either, he said quietly. I think someone's very nervous about what this test is going to show. Nervous enough to pay extra. To rush it. To have it done right before the wedding instead of months ago when a normal person would want to know. Daniel set the phone down. If I help you, I lose my job. Maybe my license. Gene Care has lawyers. Good ones. If you don't help me, an innocent man marries into a lie, and the real father, whoever he is, gets away with it. That's not my problem. No, I said, but you emailed me anyway. He was quiet for a long time. Then, the sample collection is at 10. Results are promised by end of day Thursday. Tomorrow. The wedding is Saturday. Cutting it close. That's the point. If the results are bad, there's barely time to cancel. To manage the fallout. But there's also barely time for anyone to question them. Can you get me the results? Absolutely not. Can you tell me if they've been tampered with? He hesitated. Maybe. If I see something obvious. But I won't have access to the raw data. Only the final report. That's enough. Daniel stood. I'm already regretting this. Join the club, I said. He left without touching his coffee. Marcy called at noon. You're not going to believe this, she said. Her voice was tight, angry. Try me. Halpern just submitted a filing for a venue contract modification. For the Riverside estate. That's where the wedding is. Modification for what? Guest capacity increase. They're adding 30 people, last minute. She paused. Has capacity, 135 to there. Company, 1%. 1%, 1%, 1% to that. Has capacity increase. Stephen, the filing includes a note about additional security measures and media management protocols. I was standing outside the hotel, watching traffic. They're expecting trouble. Or preparing for it. The wedding is tomorrow. Who adds security the day before, unless they think something's going to happen? Someone who knows exactly what's going to happen, I said. And wants to control it. There's something else. Marcy's voice dropped. I did some digging. Gene Care Labs received a $50,000 donation last month from the Riverside Foundation. That's Laura's father's charitable organization. $50,000. A month ago, right around the time Laura announced her pregnancy. They bought the lab, I said. They bought influence. Maybe a specific person, maybe a specific outcome. I thanked her and hung up. Then I got in my car and drove to the Riverside estate. The flowers were white, the tablecloths were linen, and the lies were expensive. I parked 3 blocks away and walked. The estate sat on 2 acres of manicured lawn, separated from the street by an iron fence and professional landscaping. A white tent covered the garden area. I could see workers inside, setting up chairs in perfect rows, adjusting centerpieces, testing the sound system. A catering truck was parked by the service entrance. Men in white jackets carried trays and boxes, building a feast for 200 people who would toast to a future that was already dead. I stood across the street, half hidden behind a bus stop shelter, and watched. Victoria arrived at 2:30 in a black sedan. She didn't get out, just rolled down the window and had a conversation with the wedding planner, a thin woman with a tablet and the kind of calm that comes from managing other people's chaos for a living. Richard showed up 20 minutes later. He walked the perimeter with another man I didn't recognize. Security consultant. Probably. They pointed at the fence line, at the entrance, at the street where I was standing. I turned away, pretended to check my phone. When I looked back, they were gone. Laura arrived at 4. She was alone. No Greg, no bridesmaids. Just Laura in a white SUV, driving herself, parking in the circular driveway. She sat in the car for 5 minutes before getting out. Even from across the street, I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she moved like every step required effort. She walked into the tent, came out 3 minutes later, got back in her car, and cried. I watched her through the windshield, her hands covering her face, her shoulders shaking. No one came to check on her. No one seemed to notice. The workers kept working. The planners kept planning. The world kept building a wedding around a woman who was falling apart. My phone buzzed. Text from the unknown number. Results are in. They say Greg is the father. 99.9% match. Stared at the message. Typed back. That's impossible. I know. But that's what the report says. Someone made sure of it. I looked up. Laura was wiping her eyes now. Starting the car. Pulling away from the venue. Another text. The real results are different. Very different. But they'll never see the light of day unless you do something. What do I do? Wait for the wedding. That's when everything breaks. The screen went dark. I stood there on the sidewalk, watching workers hang lights that would illuminate a celebration built on fraud. Watching them set tables for guests who didn't know they were attending a crime scene. They were toasting to a future that was already dead, and I was the only one who knew the body hadn't been buried yet. My phone buzzed again. Different number. Daniel Frost. I have something you need to see. Not over text. Tonight. Same place. 9 p.m. Daughter. I typed back. I'll be there. Then I walked back to my car and drove to the beige hotel room where I would spend the next 7 hours waiting for the truth to finally show its face. Daniel had brought printouts. We met at the coffee shop at 9 p.m. like he'd asked. And he slid a manila folder across the table without a word. His hands were shaking. The blue jacket was gone. He wore a gray hoodie now, hood up, like he was trying to disappear into himself. This is career suicide, he said. You understand that, right? If anyone traces this back to me, they won't. You can't promise that. No, I admitted, but I can promise that what's in that folder matters more than both our careers. He didn't argue. Just pushed the folder closer. Inside were 2 sets of results. Same case number, same date, same patient names, but different fathers. The first report, the official one, stamped and signed, showed Gregory Thornhill as the biological father, 99.9% probability. Clean. Conclusive. Exactly what everyone needed it to say. The second report showed the raw data, the actual genetic markers, the real analysis. Probability of paternity, 0%. Gregory Thornhill was not the father, and neither was I. Who ordered the change, I asked. I don't know. The raw data was processed normally. Then it went upstairs for quality review. When it came back down, the report had been revised. By who? Above my clearance level. But the revision was approved by someone named K. Voss, Director of Client Relations. He paused. Company no, what of Mosher in the staying, Hemadi? He paused. Hever one do one someday 7. The same person who processed the $50,000 donation from the Riverside Foundation. Money buying biology. I photographed both reports with my phone. Saved them. Backed them up. What happens now? Daniel asked. Now I wait for tomorrow. The wedding. When all of this comes apart? Now. You're going to crash it? I'm not going to have to, I said. It's going to crash itself. Saturday morning arrived cold and clear. I woke up at 6 in the beige hotel room and watched the sunrise turn the city orange. My phone was silent. No texts from unknown numbers. No calls from Laura. No messages from Marcy. Just silence. The kind of silence that comes before something breaks. I showered, dressed, made coffee from the single-serve machine that tasted like plastic and regret. Sat by the window and watched the street wake up. At 8 a.m., a florist truck arrived at the venue. At 8:30, the caterers. At 9, the first guests started parking along the street, dressed in their wedding best, carrying gifts wrapped in white paper. None of them knew. At 10:15, my phone rang. Victoria. I stared at the screen. Let it ring twice. Then answered. Mrs. Kensington. Stephen. Her voice was ice and panic in equal measure. Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Why? Because I need you to come to the estate. Now. Immediately. I wasn't invited to the wedding. This isn't. She stopped. I heard voices in the background. Shouting. Male voices. One of them was screaming. Please. Just come. We need to talk to you. About what? About the results. About. Her voice cracked. Victoria Kensington, the woman who'd looked at me like I was something tracked in on her expensive carpet, was crying. Please, Stephen, we made a mistake. A terrible mistake. And you're the only one who can. The line went dead. Not hung up, just gone. Like someone had grabbed the phone from her hand. I sat there for 30 seconds, processing. Then I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. A scream sounds different when it's wearing a tuxedo. I heard it from the parking lot before I even reached the gate. Greg's voice, raw and animal. The kind of sound that comes from a person whose entire world just collapsed. Security was at the entrance, 2 men in dark suits who looked like they wanted to stop me but weren't sure if they should. I walked past them. Nobody moved. The tent was chaos. Guests stood in clusters, confused and whispering. The string quartet had stopped playing. White chairs sat empty in their perfect rows. The altar decorated with roses and ribbons stood abandoned. And in the center of it all, in the bridal suite converted from the estate's pool house, I could see movement through the gauze curtains. Shadows. Arguing. I walked toward it. Marcy intercepted me halfway. She looked stricken. Victoria called me. I know. I heard. She grabbed my arm, lowered her voice. The results came in this morning. The real ones. Greg saw them. And? He's not the father. Neither are you. She paused. He's losing his mind. Threatening to sue everyone. Threatening to tell the guests why the wedding's canceled. Richard is trying to pay him off, but Greg's not. He's not thinking clearly. The music stopped, but the panic was just starting. Where's Laura? In there. Marcy gestured to the bridal suite. With her parents and Halpern. They've been in there for 20 minutes. I think they're trying to figure out what to tell people. And what's the plan? Postponement. Sudden illness. They're workshopping it. Her grip on my arm tightened. Stephen, this is bad. Really bad. If Greg goes nuclear, if he tells everyone what the test showed, let him. What? Let him burn it down. It's the only way the truth comes out. Marcy stared at me. You wanted this. You stayed for this. You stayed for this. I stayed because they paid me to forget something I was never supposed to remember, and now everyone's going to remember it with me. I walked toward the bridal suite. The door was closed but not locked. I could hear voices inside. Victoria, pleading. Richard, authoritative. Halpern, calm and controlled even now. And Laura, quiet, barely audible. I pushed the door open. Everyone stopped. Laura stood in her wedding dress, white silk, off the shoulder. The kind of dress that costs more than most people make in 6 months. Her makeup was ruined. Mascara tracked down her cheeks. She looked at me like I was a ghost. Victoria was still in her mother-of-the-bride dress, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Richard stood by the window, hands in his pockets, jaw tight, and Halpern, silver-haired, immaculate even in crisis, sat in a chair with his legs crossed, looking at me like I was a problem he was already calculating how to solve. "Stephen," Halpern said. "Thank you for coming." Halpern said, "I didn't come for you. Nevertheless." He gestured to an empty chair. "Please. Sit. We need to discuss the situation. The situation where neither I nor Greg is the father." Victoria made a sound like she'd been slapped. Richard's jaw tightened further. We don't know that the results are accurate. I've seen the raw data," I said. "They're accurate." Silence. Then Laura spoke. Her voice was small, broken. "How? Someone at the lab cared more about the truth than the paycheck." Halpern stood. "Stephen, I understand you're upset. You have every right to be. But there are ways to handle this that don't involve destroying everyone in the process. Like paying me off again? Like finding a solution that works for everyone." "There's no solution," I said. "Greg knows he's not the father. I know I'm not the father. The only question left is, who is? Neither of us was the father. So who was in the room?" The silence that followed was absolute. Victoria looked at Halpern. Richard looked at Halpern. Laura looked at the floor. And Halpern looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Calculation. Fear. Something else. "That's," he said carefully, "a very complicated question." "Is it?" Outside, I could hear Greg shouting again. Security trying to calm him down. Guests murmuring, confused, starting to leave. "The wedding is canceled," Richard said flatly. "We're telling people it's postponed due to unforeseen circumstances. The vendors have been paid. The guests will be sent home. This doesn't have to become a scandal," I finished. "Too late. Stephen." Laura's voice. "Quiet. Please, don't do this." "I'm not doing anything. The DNA did this. Biology did this. I'm just standing here, watching it happen." "You could leave," Halpern said. "Right now, walk away. We'll double the settlement, $4 million, plus a guarantee that none of this traces back to you." "I don't want your money." "Then what do you want?" I looked at each of them. Victoria with her tears. Richard with his controlled rage. Halpern with his calculations. Laura with her ruined dress and ruined life. "I want," I said slowly, "to know who the father is. And I want you to tell me why you've all been lying to protect him." The door burst open. Greg stood there, tuxedo disheveled, face red, eyes wild. He looked at the room, at all of us, and laughed. It was the laugh of someone who'd just lost everything and decided to take everyone else down with him. "You want to know who the father is?" he said. "Ask them. Ask the family lawyer who's been managing this whole fucking charade." He pointed at Halpern. "Ask him why his DNA is probably all over those babies." Greg's accusation hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the distant murmur of confused guests outside, and the hum of the air conditioning that suddenly felt too cold. Halpern didn't flinch, didn't stand. He just sat there in his chair, legs still crossed, hands folded in his lap, watching Greg with the expression of someone observing a tantrum from a safe distance. "That's quite an accusation, Gregory," Halpern said finally. His voice was calm. Too calm. "Based on what evidence?" based on the fact that you've been controlling every fucking aspect of this situation from day one. Greg's hands were shaking. Based on the fact that you're the one who pushed for the prenatal test. You're the one who rushed the results. You're the one who had them falsified. Allegedly falsified. Halpern corrected. Don't. Greg took a step forward. Security appeared in the doorway behind him, uncertain whether to intervene. Don't do that lawyer thing where you make it sound like I'm the crazy one. I saw the real results. Stephen showed them to me. That was a lie. I hadn't shown Greg anything. But I didn't correct him. Victoria made a choking sound. You spoke to Stephen? He texted me an hour ago. Told me to demand to see the raw data. So I did. Greg pulled out his phone. And guess what? The lab director suddenly got very nervous. Started talking about privacy protocols and proper channels and all the shit people say when they're hiding something. This is absurd, Richard said. But his voice lacked conviction. Greg turned to Laura. Did you know? When you slept with him, did you know what he was? What he'd been doing to this family for years? Laura's face went white. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. That's enough. Halpern stood now. Gregory, you're understandably upset. The situation is complicated and emotions are high. But making wild accusations isn't going to help anyone. Then take the test, Greg said. Right now, prove me wrong. I don't have to prove anything to you. Because you know what it'll show. Silence is louder than screaming when you know what it's hiding. Halpern looked at Richard. Richard looked at Victoria. Victoria looked at Laura. And Laura looked at me. Her eyes pleading for something I couldn't give her. Everyone needs to leave, Richard said finally. Now, this is a private family matter. I'm supposed to be family, Greg said. You were never family, Victoria snapped. You were a solution to a problem. The words landed like a slap. Greg stared at her. Then at Laura. Then at all of us. Fuck all of you, he said quietly. Then, louder. Fuck all of you. He turned and walked out. Security didn't stop him. Neither did anyone else. Through the window, I watched him cross the lawn, still in his tuxedo, and climb into his car. He sat there for a moment. Hands on the wheel. Then he drove away. Tires kicking up gravel. The guests were leaving too. I could see them trickling toward the parking area, checking phones, whispering to each other. The wedding planner stood near the tent, speaking into a radio, coordinating the dismantling of an event that never happened. Stephen, Halpern said, a word, privately. Anything you say to him, you say in front of all of us, Richard said. Halpern smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Very well. Stephen, I'm prepared to offer you a revised settlement. $4 million, as previously mentioned, plus a full release from the NDA. You're free to speak about your marriage, your divorce, anything you like. But, he paused. In exchange, you agree not to make any public statements regarding the paternity question or any allegations involving me or the family's legal representation. You want to buy my silence about you being the father. I want to protect everyone in this room from a scandal that would destroy lives, including yours. My life's already destroyed. You saw to that. Then let us compensate you for it. Generously. Generously. I looked at Laura. She was crying silently now. Mascara running. Wedding dress wrinkled. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Did he force you? I asked her directly. She didn't answer. Laura, I said. Did Halpern force you? It's not. Her voice broke. It's not that simple. It is that simple, yes or no. Halpern moved between us. This conversation is over. Stephen, you have 24 hours to consider my offer. After that, the terms change. What terms? You can't threaten me. I don't have anything left to lose. Don't you? Halpern pulled out his phone. Showed me a photo. It was me, sitting in the coffee shop with Daniel Frost. Clear enough to identify both of us. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Theft of confidential medical records. Blackmail. I have very good lawyers, Stephen. Better than you can afford. The truth was close enough to touch, and it was ugly. I looked at the photo, at Halpern's calm face, at Richard's stony expression, at Victoria's tears, at Laura's silence. Then, I turned and walked out. They weren't mourning a wedding, they were burying a scandal. The next 48 hours were silent. Laura's Instagram went dark. The wedding hashtag disappeared. Victoria's Facebook account, usually full of charity events and society photos, showed nothing. Richard's LinkedIn was unchanged, professional, sterile. Greg deleted everything. It was like the wedding had never been planned, like the whole event had been erased from reality. I sat in the beige hotel room and watched the silence spread. Marcy texted once. "Are you okay?" I didn't answer. Daniel texted. "They're investigating the leak. I might be fired. Was this worth it? Was this worth it? Was this worth it?" I didn't answer that either. Halpern called 3 times, left no voicemails. On Sunday evening, 43 hours after the wedding collapsed, an email arrived. The sender, truth.architect@protonmail.com. The subject, "You're looking at the wrong crime." I opened it. "Stephen, you're right that Halpern is the father. But you're wrong about why this matters. This isn't about an affair. It's not about infidelity or even abuse, though both are present. This is about control, about ownership, about a man who has spent 20 years building a system where he owns every secret, manages every crisis, and profits from every silence. Laura isn't his only victim. She's just the most visible one. The father isn't a stranger. It's someone who's been in the room the whole time. Someone they trust, someone they pay. Someone who has leverage on everyone because he's the one who creates the leverage. You want proof? Look at the Riverside Foundation's tax filings. Look at who sits on the board. Look at who controls the money that controls the family. The babies are just the latest crime. But they're the one he can't bury. Meet me, Tuesday, 7 p.m. The park across from your hotel. Come alone. And bring the medical records. All of them. Not just yours. A friend. I read the email 3 times. Then I opened a new browser window and searched for the Riverside Foundation's public filings. It took 20 minutes to find what I was looking for. Board of Directors. Richard Kensington, Chairman. Victoria Kensington. Secretary. Mr. Anthony Halpern, Treasurer and Legal Counsel. Grants issued. Previous year. Gene Care Laboratories. Chinsazachi 0. Westwood Medical Center. $75,000. Street Catherine's Hospital. $100,000. I clicked on Street Catherine's Hospital. Read the grant description. To support the development of advanced reproductive health services and patient privacy protocols. Patient privacy protocols. I pulled up Laura's medical history, the documents I'd found in our shared insurance portal before she locked me out. Found the hospital where she'd been receiving prenatal care. Street Catherine's Hospital. I sat back. Stared at the screen. Halpern wasn't just the father. He'd built the entire infrastructure to hide it. The foundation donated to the labs and hospitals. The foundation controlled the money. Halpern controlled the foundation. He'd created a system where he could commit crimes and then pay to erase them. And Laura was caught inside it. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Did you get the email? Did you get the email?" I typed, "Yes." "Will you meet me?" I hesitated. This could be a trap. Could be Halpern trying to draw me out. But I'd come this far. "I'll be there," I typed. "Good. Because what I have to show you is bigger than the babies. Bigger than Laura. This goes back years. Who are you?" 3 dots. Then, someone who used to work for him. Someone who knows where all the bodies are buried. The message felt final. I closed the laptop. Looked around the beige room that had been my command center for a week. At the notes I'd taken. The printouts I'd made. The evidence I'd gathered. I'd thought I was investigating a paternity question. But I'd stumbled into something else entirely. A system. A machine. A man who'd turned secrecy into power and power into control. And on Tuesday at 7 p.m., I was going to find out exactly how deep it went. Tuesday came slowly. I spent the intervening hours researching. The Riverside Foundation had been active for 12 years. Halpern had been treasurer for 11 of them. In that time, the foundation had donated over $3 million to medical facilities, legal aid organizations, and family wellness initiatives. Every single recipient had, at some point, provided services to the Kensington family or their associates. It wasn't philanthropy. At 6:45 p.m., I left the hotel room and walked to the park across the street. It was small, half a block of grass, some benches, a playground that had seen better days. A few people walked dogs. A jogger passed through. No one looked twice at me. I sat on a bench facing the street and waited. At 7:03 p.m., a woman approached. She was mid-40s. Professional. Wearing a gray coat and carrying a leather bag that looked expensive but worn. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun. Her face was familiar in the way faces sometimes are when you've seen them in the background of your life but never really looked. She sat down beside me. Didn't look at me, just stared straight ahead at the traffic. "Marcy said you were analytical," she said. I turned to look at her. "Who are you?" "My name is Helen Pritchard. I was Mr. Halpern's paralegal for 8 years. Before Marcy. Before you." "Was? I resigned 6 months ago. Took a severance package that came with an NDA I'm about to violate." She finally looked at me. Her eyes were tired. Sad. "I'm risking everything being here. So please don't waste my time with questions you already know the answers to. Halpern is the father." "Yes. And he's done this before." She didn't answer immediately. Just reached into her bag and pulled out a small digital recorder. The old kind. The kind that still used mini cassettes. "Before we get to the recording," she said, "you need to understand what you're dealing with. Anthony Halpern isn't just a lawyer. He's a fixer. A cleaner. The person rich families call when they have problems that can't be solved through normal channels. I know that." "No, you don't. You know the theory, but you don't know the practice." She turned the recorder over in her hands. "I've seen him make DUIs disappear. Make assault allegations vanish. Make inconvenient business partners accept buyouts they didn't want to accept. He does it through leverage, through knowing everyone's secrets, and having the resources to exploit them." "And Laura?" Helen's jaw tightened. "Laura has been under his control since she was 22. That's when she came to him with a problem, a college boyfriend who was threatening to release intimate photos. Halpern made it go away. But in the process, he gained something. Leverage. Access. He became her protector, her confidant, the person she called when things went wrong. And over the years, that relationship became something else. The coffee was burnt, but the recording was crystal clear. Helen pressed play. The audio was muffled at first, ambient noise, movement, the sound of a door closing. Then Laura's voice, strained and quiet. "I can't keep doing this." Halpern's voice, calm and measured. "You're not doing anything, Laura. We're solving a problem together. I'm pregnant. That's not a problem to solve. That's a complication. Which is why we're managing it carefully." "Managing it? You're asking me to lie to Stephen? To lie to everyone?" I'm asking you to protect yourself. And your family. If this gets out, if people know the father is me, it destroys everything. Your parents' reputation. The foundation. Your future. My future? What future? I'm trapped. I've been trapped since I helped you. Since I protected you. Yes. And I'll continue to protect you. But protection requires cooperation. A long pause. Then Laura, quieter. "The babies will be provided for. Generously. They'll want for nothing. But they can't know about me. No one can. That's why we're divorcing Stephen now. Before they arrive. That's why Greg is being positioned as the father. Greg doesn't know? Greg knows what he needs to know. He's being compensated for his cooperation. Everyone wins. Except Stephen. Stephen gets $2 million to walk away from a marriage that was failing anyway. He's hardly a victim here. Well. And if he doesn't walk away? Halpern's voice went cold. Then we make him. The same way I make anyone disappear who threatens what we've built. Another pause. Then, the father is me, Laura. The babies are mine, and that's how it stays. Forever. Do you understand? Yes. Say it. I understand. Good girl. The recording ended. I sat there on the park bench, listening to the silence that followed. Cars passed on the street. Someone's dog barked. The world kept moving like it hadn't just heard a man claim ownership of another person's life. It wasn't an affair. It was an acquisition. When was this recorded? I asked. 4 months ago. Late June. Right after Laura told him she was pregnant. Helen put the recorder back in her bag. I was in the office that day. She came in without an appointment. I could hear them through the door. So, I recorded it. Why? Because I'd seen him do this before. Not the pregnancy that was new, but the control, the manipulation, the way he turned protection into ownership. She looked at me. I couldn't stop it, but I could document it. Who else has he done this to? I have records of 6 other women over the years. All clients. All vulnerable in some way. All given help that came with strings attached. She paused. Laura is just the one who got pregnant. The voice on the tape didn't sound guilty. It sounded entitled. I pulled out my phone. I need to send this to someone. Multiple someones. Before Halpern finds out you gave it to me. He already knows I took it. Why do you think I resigned? Why do you think I signed an NDA? Helen stood. But the NDA doesn't mean anything if the content goes public through someone else. Through you. Why me? Because you're the only person who can use it without being destroyed. You're already divorced. Already paid off. Already outside the system. Halpern has no leverage over you anymore. He threatened to charge me with fraud. Theft of medical records. Empty threats. He won't risk discovery. It had nothing on it except an email address. Send the recording there. It goes to a journalist I trust. Someone who specializes in powerful men who abuse their positions. I took the card. What happens to Laura? When this comes out? I don't know. But she'll finally be free of him. And maybe that's worth the scandal. Helen started to walk away, then stopped. Turned back. Stephen? The $2 million. Don't give it back. You earned it. You earned it by being married to someone who was being controlled by a predator. You earned it by being erased so his crime could stay hidden. Her expression softened. Take the money. Use it to rebuild. And make sure that when this story breaks, everyone knows Halpern isn't a family lawyer. He's a family predator. Halpern. She walked away into the dusk. I sat there for another 10 minutes, holding the business card, thinking about the recording. About Laura's voice, trapped, resigned, defeated. About Halpern's voice, calm, controlling, certain of his power. Then I opened my email. Attached the audio file. Typed a subject line. The father isn't who they say he is. And pressed send. The response came 4 hours later. Stephen, thank you for this. I verified the voices with a forensic audio specialist. It's authentic. I've also confirmed the timeline with medical records and public filings. This is exactly what I need to break the story. But I need more. I need you to go on record. To tell your side. To explain what happened from the inside. Are you willing? A. Morrison. Investigative reporter. The Chronicle. I stared at the email. Going on record meant no more hiding. No more watching from hotel windows. It meant stepping into the light and letting everyone see what Halpern had done. It also meant becoming the story. I typed back, yes. But on one condition. Laura's not the villain here. Make sure people understand that. The response was immediate. Understood. Can we meet tomorrow? I have more questions. And I want to show you something I've found in the Foundation's tax records. Something that connects to other families. Other victims. Other victims. This wasn't just about Laura. It never had been. I typed where and when. But before I could hit send, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Stephen Ratchet? A woman's voice. Professional. Unfamiliar. Yes. This is Detective Sarah Chen with the Metro Police. I'm calling about a complaint filed against you this evening. Allegations of harassment, stalking, and theft of confidential medical information. The complaint was filed by Mr. Anthony Halpern on behalf of his clients. My stomach dropped. That's not. I haven't stalked anyone. I understand, sir, but we need you to come in for questioning. Tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. Downtown precinct. Am I being arrested? Not at this time. But failure to appear could result in a warrant. She gave me the address and hung up. I sat there in the dark park, holding my phone, watching the screen fade to black. Halpern was making his move, and I had less than 12 hours to make mine. I didn't go to the police station at 9 a.m. Instead, I went to Halpern's office. The same building. The same 14th floor. The same marble hallway that echoed with the ghosts of every person who'd been bought, silenced, or erased within these walls. The receptionist looked surprised to see me. Tell Mr. Halpern I'm here. He'll make time. She picked up the phone, spoke quietly. Her expression shifted from surprise to concern. Conference room B. He'll meet you there. I knew the room. Same one where I'd signed my life away for $2 million. Same mahogany table. Same aggressive air conditioning. Same floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city that didn't care about any of this. But this time, I wasn't alone. Richard and Victoria were already seated when I arrived. Richard in his usual position by the window, Victoria in the chair she'd occupied before, pearls and posture intact but eyes red-rimmed. Laura sat between them, looking smaller than ever in a gray sweater that swallowed her frame. Halpern wasn't there yet. Stephen, Richard said without turning from the window. This is inappropriate. You were asked to come to the police station, not here. I know. But I figured we should have this conversation before I talk to the police. Give everyone a chance to get their stories straight. Victoria's hands trembled as she clutched her purse. There's nothing to. We haven't done anything wrong. We de stay defend. 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 That's not true, and you know it. Laura finally looked at me. Stephen, please. Don't make this worse. Man rees nowadays doing sounds. Man rees nouns. Worse than what? Worse than being controlled by a man who's been manipulating your family for years? Worse than being pregnant with his children and having to pretend they belong to someone else? Victoria gasped. Richard turned from the window, face flushed. That is a vile accusation. It's the truth. And I have proof. The door opened. Halpern entered, carrying his leather briefcase, looking exactly as he always did. Composed, professional, untouchable. He registered my presence with barely a flicker of acknowledgement. Stephen, I wasn't aware we'd rescheduled. He set the briefcase on the table. Though I suppose this is more convenient than having you arrested for failure to appear. Cancel the police complaint, I said. I don't think so. You've crossed several legal lines in the past week. Theft, harassment, conspiracy. I have a recording of you admitting you're the father of Laura's children. I have financial records showing how you've used the Riverside Foundation to buy influence at medical facilities. And I have a journalist who's ready to publish all of it unless we reach an agreement today, right now. I didn't bring a lawyer. I brought a mirror. The room went silent. Halpern's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Calculation, concern. The first crack in the facade. That's, Victoria started. A recording? Richard interrupted. Of what? Halpern held up a hand. Everyone needs to stay calm. Stephen is clearly desperate. He's making wild claims. I pulled out my phone, set it on the table, pressed play. Laura's voice filled the conference room. I can't keep doing this. Then Halpern's. "You're not doing anything, Laura. We're solving a problem together." Victoria's face went white. Richard's jaw clenched. Laura closed her eyes. I let it play for 30 seconds. Then stopped it. "I have the full recording," I said. 4 minutes, including the part where you say, "The father is me, Laura." Halpern sat down slowly, folded his hands on the table. When he spoke, his voice was measured, controlled, but there was an edge to it now. "That recording was obtained illegally. It's inadmissible in court, and publishing it would constitute defamation. I'm not taking you to court. And it's not defamation if it's true." I slid a folder across the table. "Here's a transcript. So everyone in this room knows exactly what you said." He looked at the transcript like it was a death sentence. Richard grabbed it first, scanned the pages. His face went from red to white to gray. He set it down carefully, like it might explode. "This can't be real," he said quietly. "It's real," Laura whispered. "All of it." Laura whispered. Laura whispered. Victoria made a choking sound. "Laura. Oh God. Laura." "How long?" Richard asked, still quiet, still controlled. But I could hear the rage underneath. "How long has this been going on?" Laura didn't answer, just started crying. Silent tears that she didn't bother wiping away. Halpern leaned back in his chair. "This is regrettable, but it's also more complicated than Stephen is making it sound. You got my daughter pregnant." Richard's voice was ice. "You, our lawyer, our advisor, someone we trusted, you got her pregnant and then orchestrated an entire scheme to hide it. I protected her. I protected all of you. If this had come out, you protected yourself. I protected the family's reputation, the foundation, everything we've built. You built nothing." Richard stood. "You were an employee, a servant. And you..." His voice broke. "You violated that trust. In the worst possible way." Halpern's composure finally cracked. "I've given this family 20 years of my life. I've solved problems you couldn't solve. I've made scandals disappear. I've kept this family functional when it should have collapsed under the weight of its own dysfunction. By making yourself indispensable," I said. "By creating crises only you could solve. By turning protection into control." He looked at me, really looked at me. And for the first time, I saw genuine anger in his eyes. "You have no idea what you're interfering with. What this family is. What they need." "What they need," I said, "is for you to be gone. That's not your decision to make." I slid another document across the table. "This is a resignation letter. Pre-drafted. You sign it. Step down from the foundation. Sever all ties with the family and agree to a paternity test. In exchange, I don't publish the recording. The journalist I sent it to agrees to hold the story. And the police complaint against me disappears. And if I refuse, then the recording goes public. Along with the financial records. Along with testimony from your former paralegal about the other women you've protected over the years. And you get to explain all of it to the Bar Association and the police and every news outlet in the city." Halpern stared at the resignation letter. "This is extortion. No, this is what accountability looks like when the legal system has been purchased. You're destroying me. I'm giving you a choice. Sign and disappear, or refuse and be dragged into the light. Your money has no value here. Only your resignation does." Victoria spoke up, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. "Sign it, Anthony." Halpern turned to her, surprised. "Victoria, you touched my daughter. You manipulated her. You..." She couldn't finish. Just shook her head. "Sign it and get out." Richard said nothing. Just stood by the window, staring out at the city, his hands in fists. Laura looked at Halpern. "Please. Just go. Let this be over." Halpern's eyes moved from face to face, calculating, measuring, looking for an ally and finding none. Finally, he picked up the pen. "This isn't over," he said as he signed. "You think you've won, but you've just made powerful enemies. I don't care about enemies. I care about the truth. He signed his name. Slid the letter back to me. I took it, photographed it with my phone, sent it to 3 different email addresses. You're off the foundation board as of today, I said. You'll submit the paternity test within 48 hours. Results go to Laura's doctor of choice, not one of your facilities. And you'll transfer all client files involving Laura to independent counsel. And the recording stays private. As long as you stay gone. Dean, bye. Tanaram, bye. Halpern stood. Gathered his briefcase. Looked at Laura one last time. I did care about you, he said quietly. In my own way. No, Laura said. You cared about owning me. There's a difference. He left without another word. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like the end of something. The 4 of us sat in silence. Richard finally turned from the window. Stephen. He stopped. Started again. Thank you. Don't thank me. I didn't do this for you. I know. He looked at Laura. We have a lot to discuss. As a family. Yes, Victoria said quietly. We do. I stood. The $2 million. I'm keeping it. Consider it payment for the 8 years I spent not knowing my wife was being controlled by your attorney. Richard nodded. That's fair. And Laura? I looked at her. You need to get actual help. Real therapy. Not someone on Halpern's payroll. Someone who answers only to you. She nodded. Still crying. Okay. I walked to the door. Stopped. Turned back. One more thing. When the babies are born, they deserve to know the truth. Not now, but someday. They deserve to know who their father is and how they came to exist. Don't bury this. Don't create new lies to cover the old ones. We won't, Victoria said. And I believed her. I left the conference room. Walked down the marble hallway. Took the elevator to the lobby. Stepped out onto the street where the afternoon sun was too bright and the city was too loud and everything felt surreal. My phone buzzed. Text from Marcy. Is it over? I typed back, yes. Are you okay? I thought about the question. About what okay meant after everything that had happened. Getting there, I typed. Then I walked toward the bank. To deposit a check for $2 million. And to start figuring out what my life looked like now that I'd taken it back. The bank teller looked at the check like I'd handed her a winning lottery ticket. $2 million, she said, mostly to herself. I'll need to get a manager to verify this. Take your time. She disappeared into a back office. I stood at the counter and waited, watching people conduct the ordinary business of their lives. Deposits. Withdrawals. A woman arguing about overdraft fees. A man filling out a loan application, optimism and desperation in equal measure on his face. Normal problems. Normal transactions. Mine was anything but normal. The manager came out, a man in his 50s, with reading glasses and a cautious smile. Mr. Ratchet. This is quite a deposit. Divorce settlement. His smile dimmed. Ah. Well, congratulations. I suppose. Not really. But thank you. He processed the check with the kind of careful attention reserved for large sums and potential fraud. Verified the signatures. Made 3 phone calls. Finally, after 20 minutes, he handed me a receipt. The funds will be available in 3 business days, pending final clearance. That's fine. I walked out of the bank $2 million richer and feeling no different than when I'd walked in. Money doesn't fix what's been broken. It just gives you options about where to be broken next. I went back to the hotel one last time. The beige room looked the same. Smelled the same. The water stain on the ceiling still resembled a Rorschach test. The mini fridge still hummed its anxious hum. But I was different. I packed methodically. Laptop, chargers, the few clothes I'd bought during the week, the folder containing all the documents, medical records, financial statements, screenshots, printouts, evidence of a story that was ending. My phone rang. Laura. I stared at her name on the screen. Let it ring 4 times. then answered, "Stephen." Her voice was quiet, steadier than it had been in the conference room. "I wanted to thank you for what you did. I didn't do it for you, I know, but thank you anyway." A pause. "I'm seeing someone. A therapist. Like you said. Dr. Reeves recommended someone. Someone who specializes in." She stopped. "In situations like mine." "Good. My parents and I are talking." "Really talking?" "For the first time in years." "That's good too." Another pause. Longer. "I'm sorry. For all of it. For not being strong enough to stop it. For letting you get caught up in—" "Laura, stop." I sat down on the edge of the bed. "You were a victim. That's not your fault. I could have told you, years ago, when it started. I could have. You did what you thought you had to do to survive. I get that now." She was crying. I could hear it in her breathing. "Will you ever forgive me?" I thought about the question, about forgiveness and what it meant, about whether I was angry at Laura or at the system that had controlled her, about the difference between blame and responsibility. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I don't hate you. And maybe that's a start. Thank you, Stephen, for everything. Take care of yourself, Laura, and the babies." "I will." I hung up. Then I opened my contacts. Found Laura's name. Looked at it for a long moment, at the 8 years of history contained in those 5 letters, and deleted it. Not out of anger. Out of necessity. Some endings aren't about winning, they're about leaving. The journalist's story ran 3 days later. I didn't read it at first. Just saw the headline on my phone while I was having breakfast at a diner 2 states away. Prominent attorney resigns amid allegations of abuse and manipulation. Diner re-say. The article was careful. No names except Halpern's. No specific details about Laura or the babies. But it laid out the pattern, the foundation donations, the medical facilities, the other women who'd been helped and then controlled. Helen Pritchard was quoted anonymously. So was Daniel Frost. So was I. The Chronicle's investigation had found 4 other families where Halpern had created similar systems of leverage and control. 4 other women who'd been turned into dependencies. By the end of the week, the Bar Association had opened an investigation. 2 of the women had filed civil suits. The Riverside Foundation was under audit. Halpern's law license was suspended pending review. The machine was dismantling itself. I drove for 6 days. No destination, just movement. West, mostly, through states I'd never visited and towns I'd never heard of. I stayed in motels that made the Prescott Arms look luxurious. Ate at diners where the coffee was burnt but honest. Watched the landscape change from urban to rural to something in between. On the 7th day, I stopped in a town called Millbrook, population 8,000, 1 main street, a library, a coffee shop that wasn't part of a chain, mountains visible in the distance. I rented an apartment, 1 bedroom, furnished, month-to-month lease. It had a window that looked out onto a park where children played, and dogs ran, and people lived lives uncomplicated by attorneys and NDAs and prenatal paternity tests. I unpacked my laptop, my files, the evidence I'd gathered. Then I put it all in a box, sealed it, wrote "closed" on the top in black marker, and put it in the closet. Marcy texted on day 15. "How are you? One birding days. One birding days 1. Different." I typed back, "Good. Different. I think. Halpern's finished. In case you were wondering. The bar is recommending permanent disbarment. He'll probably face criminal charges too. Good. Laura had the babies. Twins. Girls. They're healthy." I stared at that message for a long time. "That's good," I typed. "Tell her I'm glad they're okay." "Will do. What about you? What's next?" "I'm going to figure out who I am when I'm not solving someone else's crisis." That sounds healthy. It sounds terrifying, but I think that's the point. 6 months later, I was sitting in the coffee shop on Main Street. when my phone buzzed. Email from Richard Kensington. I almost deleted it without reading. But curiosity won. Stephen, I wanted to inform you that the foundation has been restructured. New board, new leadership, independent oversight. We're establishing a grant program for survivors of professional abuse. It seemed appropriate, given everything. Laura is doing well. The girls are thriving. We've told her that when they're old enough, we'll answer any questions they have about their father honestly. You were right about that. You didn't ask for an apology. But you deserve one anyway. For not seeing what was happening. For not protecting our daughter. For making you the collateral damage in someone else's crime. I hope you found peace. Richard, I read it twice, then closed the email without responding. Some apologies don't need acknowledgement. They just need to exist. The air outside tasted like rain and freedom. I walked through Millbrook's small downtown, past the hardware store and the bookshop and the restaurant that served breakfast all day. Past people who didn't know my story and didn't need to. Past a life that was mine and only mine. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. For a moment, I considered not answering. Considered letting the past stay in the past. But I'd learned something over the past months. Sometimes unknown numbers contain truths you need to hear. I answered. Mr. Ratchet, this is Dr. Amanda Reeves. We met a few years ago regarding... I remember. I wanted to let you know that Laura listed you as someone who could receive updates on her medical care. With your permission, of course. She's doing well. The therapy is helping. And she wanted me to thank you for the referral. I'm glad she's getting help. She also wanted me to tell you that she named one of the girls Hope. Because that's what you gave her when you refused to let the lie continue. I stood on the sidewalk, watching rain clouds gather over the mountains. Tell her thank you, I said. And tell her I hope she builds a good life. I will. Dr. Reeves hung up. I stood there for another minute, feeling the first drops of rain on my face. Then I walked back to my apartment, my small, quiet, uncomplicated apartment, and made myself coffee that wasn't burnt. I sat by the window and watched the storm roll in. And for the first time in 8 years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not because I'd won something. Not because I'd gotten revenge. But because I'd chosen to leave a system that was designed to trap me, and I'd walked away when everyone expected me to stay. I left the check on the table. I took my life instead. And that, it turned out, was worth more than $2 million ever could be. If you've ever been silenced by someone with more money than morals, you're not alone. And if you believe truth is worth more than a payout, thank you for watching this story to the end. Some battles aren't won with lawyers or money. They're won by refusing to let powerful people write your story for you. Subscribe if you want more stories about people who chose truth over comfort. Comment if this resonated with you. And remember, your life is worth more than anyone's check. Until next time,